I'm Kimberly Guilfoyle, along with Juan Williams, Jesse Waters, Dana Perino, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. We begin with the breaking news today in the special counsel's Russia probe. 13 Russians and 3 Russian entities have been charged with an elaborate plot to interfere with our 2016 presidential election. Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein made the announcement earlier, and there's a lot to break down. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge has all the details. Catherine.
Well, thanks, Kimberly. I was at that news conference at Main Justice, the Justice Department headquarters here in Washington, when they released this 37-page indictment. The charges are against 13 Russian nationals, 3 Russian organizations for allegedly defrauding the United States, but specifically the illegal use of social media to interfere in the election, in this particular case to support the candidacy of Donald Trump and to disparage Hillary Clinton. One of the key things we learned today is that this operation really predates the confirmation of either of the leading candidates in the presidential election. It began in 2014, which is when it was seeded in St. Petersburg, Russia, by an individual who was closely aligned with the Russian president. But then it really kicked off and picked up steam in mid-2016 when they took about 5 dozen people and specifically tasked them with the Russian interference in our election. Here's the Deputy Attorney General from earlier today.
There is no allegation in this indictment that any American was a knowing participant. There is no allegation in the indictment that the charged conduct altered the outcome of the 2016 election.
I've read the indictment twice now, and it's important to note that anyone who is connected to the Trump campaign is unidentified in the indictment. They're referred to simply as members, volunteers, or supporters of the Trump campaign. Since that announcement today, the president has put out a tweet, and it reads in part, "Russia started their anti-U.S. campaign in 2014 long before I announced that I would run for president. The results of the election were not impacted. The Trump campaign did nothing wrong. No collusion." The Deputy Attorney General made clear today that at least on this digital piece, they found the Russian interference, but they did not find any American was willingly cooperating with the Russians to amplify that effort. But the Deputy Attorney General was silent on other outstanding issues that may remain in the Russia case, Kimberly.
All right, Catherine, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Tremendous developments today, Dana, and in a way kind of unexpected that this was going to come out today, quite revealing, and a number of people indicted. What's your takeaway?
Well, a couple of things. One, it was such a surprise, and partly that's because while there are lots of leaks in other parts of the government, the Bob Mueller investigation, it pretty is airtight. Like, nobody knew it was coming. In fact, when the press conference was announced that it was happening at 1:15, pretty much nobody knew what it was about. Some people speculated that Rod Rosenstein was going to resign. Obviously, that didn't happen. And actually, today's development probably ensures that Rod Rosenstein is not in any danger of being fired anytime soon. I think it also proves that Mitt Romney was right. Remember in the campaign when he said to President Obama that the Russians were a geopolitical enemy, and Obama dismissed it? Turns out that in 2014, this is when all of this started. We do know that everybody's been saying that the Russians try to do this all the time.
Sure.
So it's possible that maybe the Obama administration was monitoring it in 2014 and didn't think it was that big a deal. But it certainly ramps up. And as Juan has said before, there is frustration on behalf of the Democrats that the president seemed to not have done more at the time. I think it's a solid indictment. I also think that it proves that Russian meddling was not a hoax. And so because the global threat hearing that happened this week there was a focus on this about what's happening in 2018. Hopefully now, and the president says in his statement today, or the press secretary's statement, that this is a time for everybody to work together to figure out a way to push back against the Russians. Also, for those of you Twitter bots in St. Petersburg who were tweeting me during the election, I could just,
oh my goodness,
I could say it, but I won't.
Oh.
I won't. But it really does. It was a horrible thing to go through.
Yeah.
All of anybody who was
targeted,
part of the campaign or reporting on the campaign, considered influential was just absolutely bombarded by these jerks.
All right. Well, now they've gotten to the bottom of it, so there's been some expeditious justice with these indictments. Greg, just want to talk to you a second about, the president coming out right away with his own communication strategy in terms of tweeting about it and putting the postmark back to 2014, saying, look, this does not invalidate the credibility, the authenticity, legitimacy of my campaign, my election as the United States president. And this predated anything as it relates to my campaign.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how the goalposts are being moved. The people celebrating this, pretending that meddling is collusion, is being dishonest. Anybody who says this is proof of anything beyond meddling is lying. Look, Russians, meddling is their baseball. That's their pastime. As somebody married...
Apple pie and meddling.
Exactly. As someone married to a Russian, I know this is the case. And she happens to be in Moscow right now. I don't know if that's a coincidence.
She's getting a quickie divorce based on your comments.
Here's the deal. They coordinated rallies to support Trump, and they coordinated rallies to protest Trump. So they're like that weird character in a soap opera that's trying to break up a married couple and sow discord among them and make their lives ruined. But we know this is what they do. They are the Globe's trolls. And the thing is, we have to be very stoic about this, because every time we get emotional about this stuff, and we have been emotional about this for a year, screaming at each other about whether the Russians did this and were we involved, were we colluding, they were winning. This was the whole point. Right. That's why they supported Trump, and then that's why they supported the protesters. That's why they go after you, and then that's why they start putting out emails this way.
This is what they do.
Yeah,
they've been doing it forever.
So the thing is, remember, what's the name? Rocky and Bullwinkle, who were their villains? Natasha and Boris. So we knew this even when we were kids. My point is this. When we allowed them to separate us, that was a problem. And it's a problem we can't do to them because they only have a single ideology, which is being Russian.
And we don't really have elections.
Yeah, exactly. We have a bifurcated...
You mean 99.9% of the vote for Putin was rigged?
But the bottom line is we are plagued by team sport politics that divides on every issue, and they know that. So they know how to pick the teams and have them go at each other just like a soap opera villain. I almost admire it.
You almost do, and I really appreciate a reference to Natasha and Boris. Okay, so Jesse, what do you make of today's developments and the communication piece from the president and from the press secretary?
Well, he said there's no collusion, and it doesn't look like there's any witting collusion, and that was very specific. For people that are still saying that there may have been collusion in the indictment, I read the indictment. It was a little boring, not very sexy. But at the end, it said...
But that's what the dossier is.
One of these... Yes. Right. One of these people that were Russian emailed a Trump campaign official 3 times, offering locations in Florida to have a rally. It does not even mention if the Trump campaign official emailed back. So that's all you have. They communicated unwittingly. It could have been one-way communication. I'm not going to say that there was no collusion yet. I mean, there's still no evidence of collusion according to this indictment. So what they did was basically information warfare. They set up a bunch of bots. It was only in the tens of millions of dollars, not that expensive. And they buy a bunch of ads on Facebook. And when you think of how sophisticated it wasn't that sophisticated. It was rudimentary. They would hire a person to dress up like Hillary, put a little blonde wig on, and wear a prison jumpsuit and stand at a Trump rally. So when I asked one of these people, you want to do an interview? And she said, yet. And now I understand why.
Because that really happened?
she was paid. But to your point, too, this was not...
You're going to be called to testify.
This was pro-Trump for a while, and it was pro-Bernie Sanders for a while, and it was anti-Hillary, and then it became anti-Trump after the election. So the point was to sow discord, and that was effective. But I would say the Democrats are helping the Russians sow discord because of the dossier, because of the constant accusations of treason. And if you boil it all up, I would say the dossier and these crazy allegations and the $1 billion Hillary spent on advertising and the biased mainstream media propaganda was much more influential than a few hundred Twitter bots and a few silly rallies held in New York City after the election.
All right, Juan, let me guess. You see it differently.
Oh, yeah, I do. I think that we have a situation here where we don't know the end. I mean, this is clearly still in midstream in terms of what Mueller is doing.
I agree.
But I would say that, as we heard from Rod Rosenstein, there's no direct evidence of any complicity by any specific person in the Trump campaign. We don't know. They said at times, for example, you had people in the Trump campaign who would retweet a lot of the efforts that were being made by the Russians, but again, unknowingly. And then you had people who were suggesting to them, hey, target these swing states, go after Virginia, look at Colorado, etc. But again, maybe not knowing that you're dealing with Russians who are interfering. The big point that I would register here as a takeaway is that President Trump has said repeatedly that this is fake news, this is a fraud. There was no Russian interference in this election. Well, now we know. They're definitely, the intelligence community has said it, Robert Mueller has said it, we've got an indictment. There was Russian interference in the 2016 election.
You know why he's saying that? He's referring to collusion. So you can have your meddling. That's what he's saying. Yeah, but I wasn't. What he said, you know what he meant. He said I wasn't involved. I wasn't involved. I had nothing to do with this.
Right.
We won fair and square. That's what he's saying. The fact that Russians helped us win is a hoax, is what he's saying.
And that's not true, because Russians did help him win. Because
no, they're saying there's no effect.
Russians.
They said there's no effect.
Hold on. No. What they're saying is that Russians were promoting propagandistic perspective.
Did not affect the election.
It did affect the election. It affected our conversations. Right. It affected the way we talk.
So now you're broadening the word effect.
Even when we think about, you were saying, oh, you know, they only spent so much money. Remember, they're really behind the hacking of Hillary Clinton's campaign, Podesta and all that, and spreading of all the rumors that get picked up by mainstream media that followed the whole business about her emails and all that. That's all amplified by what the Russians were doing. But on a fun level, I disagree with you, Jesse. I think it is a fun 37-page read, because they've got, you talk about dressing up like Hillary, put her in the cage, lock her up. I think that's pretty hilarious. And then they got this thing about, if you're a woke black person, Clinton is Satan, and we can't vote for the lesser of two devils. And they've also big supporters of Jill Stein, and who I think might be in some trouble herself. But I think that when you look at the way that they approach our election and us as American people, they think that we are kind of dumbcuffs.
Well, no, the reason is, Juan, is what I said. They don't have the vulnerabilities that we have. There's no way we can do this. Now, we can go, mess with Ukraine and do things like that. And by the way, we do those things. So they look at us and they go, and I have a feeling that they look at what they're doing as defensive maneuvers, finding out things that protect them, which is, what a lot of people do, not condoning it. But the interesting thing to me is I grew up in the 70s, and I remember how Cold Warriors were so mocked by the left, academia, media, Democrats, over the Russian threat when they were 8 times larger than they were now. It's so refreshing to see all these Democrats coming out and saying how evil this evil empire is. It's a little too late.
I'd like to add to that, because under Obama's watch, you had Russia invade Ukraine, you had Russia set up bases in Syria now, military bases, and propped up Assad when they gassed their own people. They shipped weapons and anti-aircraft missiles to Iran. And Obama didn't do that much. He wasn't that tough on Russia. And all of a sudden, from 2014 until 2017, a few hundred Russians with maybe $10 to $20 million did a little disinformation warfare during the election, called Hillary names and dressed up like Hillary and, retweeted a bunch of propaganda. And all of a sudden now there's indictments 4 years later. And everyone's crying like it's a new Cold War. I just feel like when we really needed the Democrats to help Republicans fight the Cold War, they were nowhere to be found. But the minute you start messing around with Hillary, then it's like, you got to fight these guys.
But nevertheless, there will be a geopolitical fallout, and also in areas like Syria.
Wait till I get home.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens. Good luck to you, Greg. My money's on her. Funny new developments on the Florida school massacre. That's next. Stay with us.
Possibly prevented Wednesday's deadly school attack. A shocking admission from the Bureau. It failed to act on a tip received just last month from a person close to accused Florida gunman Nicholas Cruz. More now from Phil Keating live at the scene in Parkland. Phil.
Hey, Jesse, new information just minutes ago by the Broward County Sheriff, specifically about the accused mass murderer, that many flags, warning flags, were up long before Wednesday afternoon's terror inside that high school. And the FBI special agent in charge down here also addressing today's stunning admission that the country's preeminent law enforcement agency completely dropped the ball with prior warnings. Sheriff Scott Israel now says many clues were out there just in this county alone about 19-year-old Nikolas Cruz.
We have uncovered at the Broward Sheriff's Office that we've had approximately 20 calls for service over the last few years regarding the killer. Every one of these calls for service will be looked at and scrutinized.
In Washington, FBI Director Christopher Wray acknowledging publicly today that on January 5th, last month, the FBI was told by a person close to shooting suspect Cruz about his erratic behavior, love of guns, and specific potential to carry out a school shooting. The FBI's Miami field office should have received that information up the chain of command as a potential threat to life to follow up and investigate. It did not happen. 5 weeks later, 17 students and teachers are now dead, and former student 19-year-old Nikolas Cruz is charged with 17 counts of first-degree murder. FBI Director Christopher Wray apologizing, quote, "We have spoken with victims and families and deeply regret the additional pain this causes all those affected by this horrific tragedy." And Republican Governor Rick Scott up in Tallahassee, who was at the school Wednesday within hours of the massacre, quickly sent out this very terse statement, quoting here, "The FBI's failure to take action against this killer is unacceptable. 17 innocent people are dead, and acknowledging a mistake isn't going to cut it. The FBI director needs to resign." Also getting word from the Sun-Sentinel, who interviewed Broward County School Superintendent Robert Runcie, that the crime scene, the 3-story building behind me, which is known as the freshman building, and most of their classes are there. That's why so many of these victims were just 14 years old. They will never have to return to that building, any of the survivors. It is going to be demolished. Back to you.
Thank you, Phil. All right, Kimberly, this just makes me so upset. We know the full responsibility is on the shooter.
Correct.
But at the same time, if you get a call into the field office in Miami and you know the person is a close person, not a random person, and goes through the list, has a weapon, motivated to possibly shoot up a school, disturbing behavior on social media, and you don't act, what could possibly be the explanation for not following up?
You know, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure they're going to lay awake at night upset and tormented over it. But this is, you know, why we have the FBI, to follow up on details like this, to follow up on leads, to, you know, chase them down to prevent this type of thing from happening. It's not like this is something that is unfamiliar to us in terms of school shootings. And people usually do indicate and show some signs and make some overtures, you know, through communication, social media or otherwise, or do something where they tell somebody what they're about to do. So there's opportunities to be able to try to prevent something like this from happening. And when you think about it, like, this should have been chased down. They should have and could have done better in a situation like this, because quite frankly, all the elements were there. The statements, the intention, the ability to carry it out, the specifics of it in terms of being, you know, a school shooter, somebody who was coming from a troubled background, people who had said that there was, you know, making complaints and saying that this was a disturbed individual. So this is a particular case that should have gotten the focus and attention. Obviously.
What kind of accountability would you like to see here at the FBI, Juan?
Well, I think you have to look at the protocols in terms of how they handle these situations so that in the future you don't have a repeat. I'm a little slower. I think the FBI does a pretty good job on a daily basis and has more responsibilities than ever in terms of dealing with terrorism and the like and changing nature of threats to our society. As I understand it, I think the call came nationally and then it was not directed to the local field office. So that's the question. Why wasn't it? And it was 2 instances. In one case, there was some kind of visual screen grab that they couldn't find the address.
On the YouTube
Right.
comment.
And then the second is the phone call with that information. So you have 2 instances. And would that then, Jesse, have been sufficient for someone to put that puzzle together and say, hey, we've got 2 now on this. Let's look at this. But you got to remember, you got people who will call and say somebody is really a nut, and I think that guy's got a gun. And I know a lot of gun owners and et cetera would say that's unnecessary. They should not be pursuing or interfering with my rights. So it's a little bit of a delicate dance. But I do not understand the governor of Florida saying that the FBI director should be thrown out. I just think they're looking for scapegoats at that point. Somebody may have to go, somebody may lose a job, but I don't see it as the FBI director.
Maybe not the director, but the FBI does not have a good track record on some of these issues. We had Fort Hood, the Boston bombing, the Orlando nightclub shooting, where the FBI had contact or knew about something and was unable to act to prevent tragedy. How do you see it?
I agree they have to look at all their protocols, and also I would be curious about the sharing of information between local police and the FBI, because the sheriff just said they had 20 calls into the local office about him. So is there a way that you can know if there's 20 calls into the local office and then the FBI gets a call, is there a way to make that connection?
Yeah,
because
like 9/11.
hindsight is 20/20, and it's easy to, after an incident, to look back and look at all the different places that they missed. But I go back to saying what I said yesterday. I think the FBI needs a lot more resources.
Yeah, money and resources. Greg.
Well, you got to look back. I mean, this is why quick emotional responses to events rarely turn out correct. When you step back rationally, look at what's happening, look back, you find out very disturbing things. And this is very disturbing for a lot of reasons. Number one, I said this before, when you tell somebody if they see something, say something, then you better do something.
Yeah.
Because we're taking a risk. When you see something and you say something, you're taking a risk. Yep. That person could come back and get you. And if the law enforcement is not there after they implore you to do this, then what good are you at that point? And it, you know, I know that it's like you said, it is really hard to chase down leads because 80% of the time, probably 90% of the time, they're just losers in a basement. And we know this working in television. We've all had threats. We've all dealt with law enforcement. I've been in situations where the threat is absolutely real, where the person comes to the city. I've had threats, we all had them, that were nothing. But the point is, it is hard, but that's why they do the job. We're not allowed to do this. We're not allowed to go pursue threats because we would go to jail. It's up to them. If I knew that there was a kid on my street that was getting 20 local calls, that had a large gun, or putting in 20 calls, that was planning on doing this, I can't stop him myself because I could go to jail. So I need law enforcement to do this. So it's hard to find sympathy. I understand that there are mistakes. And it's a shame they were wrong on this one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say one last thing before we go, which is last night at the vigil, the kids and the police chief were all saying, no more guns. We got to do something about it. We can find a way to solve this problem.
All right. Mitt Romney makes it official. He's running for office again. Next.
Always about booze.
Mitt Romney didn't make it to the White House in 2012, but he's going to try again to work in Washington, this time, though, on Capitol Hill.
Utah has a lot to teach the politicians in Washington. Utah has balanced its budgets. Washington is buried in debt. Utah exports more abroad than it imports. Washington has that backwards. Utah welcomes legal immigrants from around the world. Washington sends immigrants a message of exclusion. And on Utah's Capitol Hill, people treat one another with respect. I have decided to run for United States Senate because I believe I can help bring Utah's values and Utah's lessons to Washington.
So the former governor of Massachusetts with Utah roots, hoping to fill the seat of retiring Utah Senator Orrin Hatch. Greg, I'll go to you first. He made the ad that he released today was very Utah focused. He's not worried so much about Washington, but trying to really run in his state.
You talking to me?
Yeah.
Hey, I doubt a scandal's going to bring down Mitt. I mean, I could just see MSNBC saying we have conclusive tape that he said golly geez darn when he stubbed his toe. But there's a point to this. I remember, and the Democrats have to remember, how awful they treated this very good man in order to reelect their guy who didn't deserve reelection. They made this guy seem like the devil over being a bully when he was a child, putting his dog on top of a roof. There were all these things they did.
Binders full of women?
Binders full of women when he was actually talking about all the capable women that he was going to hire. My point is, that's why it's hard to take their deeply venomous attacks on Trump seriously, because if it wasn't Trump, whoever would it have been, if it was Rick Perry or Marco Rubio, they would be just as vicious.
What do you think, Juan?
He agrees.
I was
Next.
curious. I was curious to listen to that, given what I see as the venomous attacks on Hillary Clinton in the last campaign. But
she deserves
you know what? So I'm very interested in this Mitt Romney run because the quick criticism would be he's a carpetbagger, right? And you heard this from the chairman of the Republican Party in Utah, who said, you know, Mitt Romney wasn't born here, his kids weren't born here. He even threw in something very odd. He said Mitt Romney doesn't shop here. I don't get that. So Mitt Romney has reached out to him to try to emphasize that Mitt Romney's committed to Utah, and he's going to make a hyper-local campaign. That's why, as you were pointing out, this is all about, as you saw in the ad, that he is a person who is rooted in Utah, cares about Utah values. Donald Trump is the other side of this. He's pro-immigration, right? He talks about respectful interactions with people. I don't know, maybe Donald Trump, unlike Orrin Hatch, unlike Jason Chaffetz, Republican, you know, maybe Donald Trump will say, you know, I don't want this guy.
Kimberly, I remember Ronan back in the 2012 campaign. I can't remember his nickname, but it was a cute one.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that somebody who, Rimini, that's right, who is willing to put themselves out there for public service, because he's been around the block a couple times. He knows that the attacks are going to come from his right and from the left.
Yeah, and I think he's going to do quite well, to be honest. I think he's very statesmanlike. He's measured. He's, like I said, in law school, like the reasonable man standard. You feel somewhat self-soothed when you listen to him speak. And I think he's a, very patriotic American. He has served this country well and admirably. He was unfairly chastised and criticized when he brought up the emphasis of, Russia and the impact that they had in terms of our elections and whatnot. He was roundly criticized for it, and it turns out he was right. I think he's well positioned at this time to take the mantle there. He's very popular in Utah. I don't think that he's going to have any issues, really. Ultimately, I think he's going to prevail and take that seat.
Yeah, I think that the polling, Jesse, he was up on his Democratic opponent by like 65 points.
Yeah, it's going to be landslide city. To Juan's point, I think Romney has more of a connection to Utah than Hillary had to New York, so I wouldn't run on the carpetbagger thing. He's going to be a huge asset to the Republican Party in the Senate. He self-finances. He's a great messenger. He's polished, professional, he's great looking on television, and he's a great talker about taxes. He talks about taxes and economics better than I think anybody in the Senate right now. I dislike what he said about Trump, about how he was a phony and a charlatan. Totally disagree with him on that. Hopefully they've risen above that, but he is going to be baited by the mainstream media every single day to say something negative about Donald Trump when he gets into the Senate. And the president's just as sensitive, I think, probably more.
But they'll try to bait the president.
And exactly, and they just cannot fall for it.
Just ignore each other for the next 9 months.
Right.
But the bigger news electorally was that Kevin Cramer of North Dakota has decided to get into that race. This means that the Republicans do have a pickup opportunity in North Dakota because Heidi Heitkamp is the Democrat there. Trump won the state by 36 points. And so landing that recruit was a big deal for the NRSC. All right, the fate of the Dreamers remains in limbo after the Senate rejects 4 plans to save them from deportation. So what now? Next.
Back to the drawing board in Washington on immigration, as 4 proposals to resolve the timely issue over Dreamers blocked by the Senate yesterday. The president, of course, pointing fingers at my party, the Democrats. He tweeted, quote, "Cannot believe how badly DACA recipients have been treated by Democrats. Totally abandoned. Republicans are still working hard." Just a couple more weeks to go until the March 5th DACA deadline. So, Jesse, you have a situation here where the Justice Department is now asking the Supreme Court to look at the local courts, which were trying to say that Trump was acted illegally and ended DACA. You've basically a stall on Capitol Hill. What do you see? What's coming?
I don't know what's coming, but I don't see a deal coming. The parties are so far apart on this issue, and the Republicans have offered so much to the Democrats, and they're still saying no. Think about it. They're offering $1.8 million amnesty with border wall funding. They're not even putting ending chain migration or ending the lottery on the table, and the Democrats are still saying no. I don't know what more the Republicans can offer aside just dealing with the Dreamers alone independently and no border wall funding in order to get the Democrats to say yes.
Well, Dana, in fact, what you see is that the President's proposal includes cuts to legal immigration, and the Wall Street Journal this morning said, hey, President Steve Miller and the ideologues have to back off because the Democrats have offered money for a wall plus the pathway for the Dreamers.
Well, I have to say, Infrastructure Week has been amazing.
Hasn't it?
I mean, and this really was supposed to be Infrastructure Week. I don't think the Dreamers are going to buy what President Trump is tweeting. I think that they are going to stick with the Democrats and think that that is where they have the best bet. But when the president said he would take the heat for both the left and the right and to try to get this deal done, I really thought that that was smart. One, because he's one of the only politicians that could actually stand the heat and survive out of it. But right now, it looks like they're not really willing to take it.
And Greg, what you saw voted down was the president's proposal, one of the things that got voted down.
It's kind of funny. I mean, I said this before, that how the script has been flipped. Here's a Republican offering a path to citizenship, and here are Democrats blocking it. This could be a sea change where ideology and party deviate, and Republicans become the party of immigration. And it is interesting to see that caring for humans for Democrats is only a party priority, not a moral one. So they can actually reject Dreamers. They can reject the people that they claim to support and preserve the ability to kill a viable infant. So they'll throw anyone under the bus for their party.
So, but Kimberly, the contrary point of view is you had 11 Republicans who voted against the president's proposal.
Yeah, well, that's because there's some strong voices and opinions on both sides of this, the proponents of it, and the people who are the detractors of it. But the polling, I think this is significant, is that the American voters largely support a merit-based immigration system, as countries like Mexico use the same thing, but why can't the United States? So let's see what happens.
All right. Facebook Friday, when the 5 returns. Stay with us.
Yay.
That is a very important commercial for my lifetime. Facebook Friday, especially with this great question from Todd S. If you could go back to one decade and have the 5 air 5 days a week, just like now, this is such a great question. What decade would you pick?
Oh, easy.
Ooh, go.
80s.
Yeah.
The 80s were so fun.
What?
Great movies, great pop culture, great music.
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan.
That's what I was going to say, because then Reagan would be a fan.
I'm going with the 60s. Juan would have big hair. I would have long hair. Gutfeld would be baked. You'd probably be just the same. Kimberly would have bell bottoms. We'd be talking about the civil rights in Nam. Everyone would be high. It'd be great.
Would I have like platform shoes on and be looking fly?
The 60s will be forever known as that stereotype. Just people hanging out, summer love, getting high. Kimberly, what's your...
No, it was the 80s, obviously, because the big hair, I'm still stuck in the 80s. And then, yes, President Reagan would be loving us. The 5 would be his favorite show. We would be hanging out at the White House and going to dinner there and having so much fun.
God, I don't remember the 80s being that great, but I was, well, anyway. Juan, thoughts?
So I think the 60s is pretty cool because you see so many ideas gain traction, everything from the women's movement to environmental movement, civil rights movement, and then, of course, the whole anti-war thing and huge controversies, assassination. Let me tell you, they wouldn't take the 5 off the air for a second.
I would pick the 70s. The 70s, not 1970s, but 70 AD. I think it'd be really cool just to be in our, like, I don't know what we'd be wearing, but there's a lot of stuff going on. I mean, that century was pretty interesting.
Had a lot of the Olympics.
Yeah. Actually, I would actually do the night in the Olympics. I think we're naked back then. The 1970s.
What?
Is amazing. I would like to be the 1970s because I was a kid then, and you'd like to see how the world was as an adult because you saw it totally differently. Like, things were really, you think as a kid, things were really great, but you only had 3 TV stations. The food was terrible.
Gas lines.
Yeah, the gas lines were ridiculous. Impeachment. It was just, but I mean, like, our choices were so limited, yet as a kid, you didn't know. You thought everybody had meatloaf every day.
I'd be defending Watergate. I'd be like, it's a burglary! It's a break-in!
There is no collusion.
No, your hand gestures.
That is so funny. Oh, my God. So true.
That was a joke. That was a joke. Make that clear.
Nixon would be one lucky guy. God. Kissinger would come on. Anyway, all right.
Kissinger does come on.
What? Yeah, he does. Well, not as much anymore. Anyway, Chris B. asks, what is your go-to movie that you can watch again and again? Jesse.
I go Casino or Goodfellas. Anytime I'm watching TV and that comes up, I watch it, or Tommy Boy.
There you go. Kimberly?
So I like Top Gun.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Right?
Yeah.
Come on.
I love Bruce Willis. He's great.
Yeah, I like the movie Bad Boys. That's one of my favorite with
The
Will
one with
Smith.
Sean Penn or the one with Will Smith? I
Will
like the
Smith and
original.
Martin Lawrence. Very, very funny.
It's Martin.
Martin.
All right. Juan, what movie could you go, if it's on, you just have to watch it? Even
Well, I watch a lot of Caddyshack. I like Caddyshack.
Yeah,
That's pretty funny. And then I'm a big fan of, and they run it all the time, Silence of the Lambs, and of course around the holidays.
It's always that seat. Everybody sits in that seat like Sons of the Lambs.
I do.
What does that tell you?
And then, of course, at the holidays, it's called A Wonderful Life?
Mm-hmm. That's what it's called.
Yeah,
That's
never saw
more,
it.
I like when you choose things like that.
Never saw it.
Not the scary.
All right,
You never
Dana.
saw A Wonderful Life?
No.
I don't believe in watching movies more than once.
Really?
It's a waste of time. But when
Except for Love Actually.
Oh.
I did watch that a few times. But when I was a kid, my sister and I had a VCR tape of Grease, and we had taped it off the television. But the problem is we'd taped it during a tornado warning. So several times during the movie, you would get a beep, beep, beep. I mean, I was thinking there was a tornado.
That's fantastic. I would have to go. It's a tie between The Exorcist and Deliverance.
Oh, Deliverance
Yeah.
is good.
This
Yeah,
is
yeah,
what
very
I'm
good.
saying.
Very
No
good.
wonder.
Yeah, no, those are
That is so
I go back to the
Deliverance
70s.
and,
The 70s had the
Silence of the
greatest
Lambs.
movies. The 70s
No,
had the
but why do you
greatest
like
movies.
movies like that?
Because I hope The Exorcist was real. Don't you? If The Exorcist is
Stop
real,
talking about it. Stop talking about it. Stop talking about it.
you understand.
No.
No? All right.
She's shutting you
She's shutting me out. She's shutting me down. I hate it when she does this. All right. You know what I'm talking about. One More Thing is up next.
Stay close a little longer, hold tight a little longer with.
It's time now for One More Thing, and I'm up first. We're going to show you this. We were going to show it to you earlier this week, but there's been a lot of breaking news. We haven't had the chance. It's on our 5 Facebook page as well. But I went on a very rough assignment for Valentine's Day to the chocolate capital of the world, Godiva, to see how some of my favorite sweet treats are made. And, well, it was love at first bite. Here we are at Rock Center and with Godiva. Let's go make some chocolate. I mean, I kind of want to eat it, but we're going to dip it. What if no one wants to buy mine?
Shake any of the excess chocolate off. There you go. And then just place it gently on the mat.
I'm just missing some champagne here, I think, with these. Strawberry. This is nice. It's like chilled. I'm going to go with one of the little cups of love. I'd give you a bite, but... Well, that for sure was a labor of love, but now I know I'm recession-proof and I know how to dip chocolate strawberries. We don't have time to show the whole piece, but again, you can catch the full video on our Facebook page. Go to facebook.com/the5FNC after the show. Let us know what you think. And Juan, you're up next.
Oh, take a look at this cover from Charleston Home and Design's Winter 2018 issue. Yes, that's our very own Dana Perino on the cover. Looks like a cowgirl from a cattle ranch in Wyoming can be quite stylish.
Looks like she's in the lake chair.
Dana's house in Bluffton, South Carolina is featured. She
What's the
tells the
address?
magazine her favorite part of taking a break in South Carolina is getting away from all the politics in New York and D.C. And as for the house, she has a mix of colors, lots of wood and iron, quite tasteful. So congratulations to Dana on her star turn.
Thank you, Juan. Thank you for reading the article.
Yeah, I liked it.
Thank you.
I'll never be on a cover like that.
Lauren for mom.
Is that right?
Not that.
Oh, not
no. Okay. Neither of you. I mean, myself. Juan, thank you very much. Okay, I had something that was kind of a fun anniversary this week. Anniversary of a milestone. The I'll Tell You What podcast hit 100 episodes, and 5Fan Photoshop did us a little picture down there of all the fun things we'd like to talk about. You can laugh and learn. There's a really funny montage that the producer Jason Bonewald put together that you'll laugh at, and it is family friendly, so you can play it in the car. The other thing I wanted to tell you about is that. What a family-friendly podcast.
Dana Perino does something that's not family-friendly.
That's the one I want.
That's Jesse's whole standard. Sexy.
Yeah. Okay, I won't use that adjective anymore. But I did want to tell you about a play I saw last night called Come From Away. It was fabulous. But take a look at this. This always happens to me. The tallest guy with the biggest hair and the best posture sits in front of me. I had the greatest seats right in the center. And my husband kept saying, we can switch. And I said, no, But I'm glad we did switch at the very end. It's a wonderful play. If you're coming to New York, get tickets so you can see it.
All right.
Good to know.
Okay, Greg, whatever.
We know where O'Reilly is.
Greg. God.
All right, sorry. All right, 2 plugs today because he's tall.
I said the biggest hair.
Tall.
Please.
Anyway, the Greg Gutfeld Show tomorrow. 10 p.m. It's going to be great. Actor Sean Kanan, Terry Shepard, Kat Tim Tyrus. You're going to love this show. Some serious topics, obviously. It was a rough week, but we're going to do it right. And then my podcast, if you go to foxnewspodcast.com.
Not family friendly.
Not friendly. It's economics professor. I know that excites people. Mark J. Perry. This guy is kind of my economic guru. Whenever I want to go and find information on the economy, he's the guy I go to on Twitter. So foxnewspodcasts.com. And you will find it there.
Gosh, you're so weird.
Happy Friday.
All right, great. I'll get a weekend break from you soon. It's going to be fabulous. Jesse.
Okay, so Water's World brought out the heavy hitters this weekend. We have Tommy Lahren, who's going to take on Joy Behar. We also have Diamond and Silk talking about the Obama portraits. That's pretty good. Also, a Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition nudity controversy.
Oh, my goodness.
Not family friendly in the back half of the show, but tune in anyway. Thank you very much.
There really are no words, are there? There are.
Oh, no, there are some words. We just can't say them.
Also, no, Gorka is on, so don't forget.
Oh, my God.
Tune
There
in
we
for
go.
Gorka.
Gorka.
Okay, we gotta go.
Sebastian Gorka.
All right. Everyone be yourself. Set your GVS. For this episode of The Five. Have a great weekend. Special report up next. Mike Emanuel in for Brett.
Thank you, Kimberly.